was talking to some folks at dinner last night and realized that there are a lot of people who don't really know what the ARRE Foundation is and what some of our goals are. So I thought this could be a good presentation for us to cover briefly this morning in David's stead. And we will do David's talk at another time virtually, and we'll invite everybody to participate in that through a webinar at some point in the near future. So the ARRE Foundation, as you heard on the first day, was founded by Laura Bednayev in 2018. And our mission has evolved to really have sort of two primary focuses, supporting families through education and building the research community. And what we find at the center of that Venn diagram, of course, is research. So making sure that the research that we're encouraging families to do is informed by family priorities, and then helping to connect the research community to the family community and understanding what those priorities are. And this meeting being here is really what that is all about. So on the left-hand side, on the family side, of course, there's this meeting, webinars, other online education. We have a growing ASXL resource library. All of the presentations from yesterday and today will go into that library. There's additional new resources. These documents that are out in the lobby, if you haven't seen these yet, these are brand new guides. They're not even on the website yet. That's how new they are. We have 3 guides: living with Boring-Opitz syndrome, living with Shashi-Pena syndrome, and living with Bainbridge-Roper syndrome. These are new resources that are translated from the Gene Reviews documents, so translated from medical publications, written in lay-friendly language for families. These are really the only sort of treatment guidelines that really exist at this point, and we wanted to make sure these were understandable by families. So these are now available. Also in that suite, this is our new provider guide. So a guide to you can share with your healthcare providers. These will all be available digitally. You can print them at home, send them electronically. So guidance for clinicians. This is a tool just for families understanding ASXL related disorders. It's basically a glossary with lots of medical terms. And then at the back, there's some nice sort of visual tools of different body systems as you learn all the different medical terminology. And then also how to participate in research. So what does it mean to participate in research? What are the different types of research you can participate in, and how to get involved in Dr. Russell's natural history study and other studies that we prioritize that are part of our community. So those resources, for those of you who are here in person, are out in the tables in the lobby. Please grab one or 2 or 3, and we'll also make them available digitally very, very soon. So we also launched, and I'll talk about this in a couple minutes, the ASXL Care Directory. And then on the research side of things, of course, the research symposium that was Thursday and Friday before many of the families were here. We do quarterly group discussions virtually with the scientific community to keep everybody engaged between meetings, focusing on bringing in new science and, of course, funding research, making all this happen. So on the supporting families through education side, building our portfolio of family support has been a sort of a growing priority that we're putting additional funding behind and additional resources in the last couple of years. So last year we launched an outreach program for newly diagnosed families, including virtual welcome calls. And we're working on building an email series and a new webpage to support new families as they come into our community, sort of give them the softest landing place that they can have and help support them as they navigate the early days of their diagnosis. And as I mentioned, the resource library with conference and webinar recordings and additional articles like the ones I just shared, and of course this meeting here. We launched, excuse me, we launched the ASXL Care Directory on Rare Disease Day in 2023. Jamie Ordauer, who's sitting at the back of the room, this was her brainchild to get this off the ground. So this is a crowdsourced directory of clinicians who are taking care of kids with ASXL related disorders. We're up to over 100 providers across 22 medical specialties, and it's actually 9 countries. And that's available at ASXL, arrefoundation.org/find-care. Please feel free to use that. And I wanted to sort of share some of the insights into like why was that important? It's not just to give families a starting point for finding care, but one of the long-term goals is to develop standards of care. But to develop standards of care, we have to have experts in ASXL related disorders. So if we can refer more families to the same clinicians, that's how we start to build that expertise. So that's really what that longer term goal is. It's not just to have a list of doctors, it's to build the expertise. On the research community side, this is a progression of photos of our research symposium from 2022 to just a couple of days ago here. This is a community that's growing. We gave 17 travel grants to young investigators to come to this meeting. Even just last year, there were just 7 of them who applied and got travel grants. So we added another 10 this year, and that's been a really incredible program that's brought new people, new ideas, new energy into our community. And was just talking to Dr. Bayless about trying to figure out how we can engage those young people in planning the 2025 research symposium and taking advantage of that energy and that really collaborative spirit that they help foster in our community. This is also an old slide, but just sort of shows, we count sort of loosely the number of researchers and doctors who are interested in our community, interested in staying in touch with us. And this meeting has really helped catalyze that over the last couple of years. And when I put the numbers together for 2024, I'm confident that we will be probably in the 90s somewhere in terms of the number of people who are interested in learning about ASXL related disorders and getting involved in research. So what I really want to talk about is the implementation of our research roadmap. So Natasha Ludwig talked about this a little bit yesterday. This is all based on a survey that we did in 2022. And a lot of what's happening here today is a result of the start of that process. So in building our research strategic plan, the fancy name is research roadmap, but it's really the research strategic plan. We wanted to make sure that that plan was really responsive to family priorities. Going back to that survey, and in that survey, that's where we learned that answering the question, what does the future hold? It's a huge priority for families. That's not a surprise to any of you, right? Because you took that survey, you told us that. And the priority domains of GI, cognition, behavior, and communication are really important to you. So that's what helped fuel this PCORI Engagement Award that Natasha talked about yesterday. And that's what those focus groups were that you participated in yesterday and the day before. So that's all tied to making sure that the research that we are funding and investing in is tied to what you all need. What is the priority for you? The other big part of that plan is figuring out what are the research gaps that are keeping us from making progress towards treatments. What are we missing? And the answer is we're missing quite a lot, but we've figured out what those things are, and we can start to put money and resources and build partnerships to help drive that forward. And it really comes down to prioritizing what we can fund and what we can catalyze. And it's really hard. It's really hard. It's a really big list, and we have to prioritize. But this process has been very helpful in figuring out what that list is. So this is a really complicated slide. You don't have to know all the terms and what all these things are, but this is basically sort of a very simplified version of the drug discovery process all the way through to drug approvals and sort of where we stand. This is a slide that I put together last year. I didn't have time to update it today, so I stepped in to sort of pinch hit for David, but you can see sort of the green check marks are things that we've made really good progress on and have a really sort of solid footing in. The orange check marks are places where we've got some initial progress, and then red where we just don't really have a lot of resources and support and engagement in getting that going yet. And some of it's stepwise, right? We have to do one thing before we do the next. But so many of these things are things that we're working on tackling right here at the conference. So the studies that you've been participating in is all part of this deep phenotyping piece, identifying family priorities through the focus groups that you were participating in over the last couple of days. You heard Dr. Russell talk about the natural history study and collecting longitudinal data over time. So we're making progress towards this. And then up at the top in that biology category, we don't have reliable antibodies, which is a critical tool for researchers to do their experiments. So last year at the Research Symposium in 2023, this emerged as a big priority for, what are researchers missing? And it's a really basic research tool. So the foundation, we've committed $60,000 to building better antibodies. We have a working group that includes scientists from across our community who have been helpful in figuring out, what are the requirements of these antibodies? How do we approach building them? Why haven't they worked in developing them in the past? How can we make more progress here? And so now that we have David, Dr. Batoon on as our Chief Scientific Officer, he's taking over leading that project. And I think he's got some great experience to bring to that, along with the advice of our medical and scientific community as well. And then some of the functional study work, which I'm not really qualified to talk about, but Dr. Bayless will touch on some of that in some of her talk. So the other piece of this research roadmap was really sort of documenting what we have and what we don't have. And so we sort of call this our public research toolbox. What do we have in terms of animal models? So, mice, zebrafish, frogs, all these important research tools that help us study the ASXL genes and how they work and how a treatment might be applied in an animal. And then cell models and models that we can derive from blood and other tissues from people. And that's what that biorepository is. And all of you who contributed blood to the biobank, that's the source of where that all comes from. So you are actively a part of building this toolbox for researchers. And as I mentioned, we've also developed some new resources for families as well. So late last year, we published these 3 different charts, the published symptoms and clinical features. This basically, we went through all of the published literature. We counted for each paper, the different symptoms and clinical features that were described in the paper and put them all in one document. And I know Laura, she uses that with all of Alex's providers. She prints a copy and hands it to them and says, this is what could potentially be coming that we know about. Like, just be aware. So I want to encourage you to look for that on our website and use that as a tool as you see fit. And then of course the new documents that I mentioned at the start of this talk. So sort of what are our immediate gaps to fill? So we know that we need to ensure that the clinical data needs are met. So that includes this sort of standardized longitudinal data over time, collected in a standardized way that can be compared. And that's what the natural history study that Dr. Russell is running is for, in conjunction with partnership with Natasha Ludwig here at Kennedy Krieger, and returning those insights to families faster. So we don't want you to feel like your participation in research goes into a black hole and you never see it again. We want to help figure out how we can get what we're learning back to families faster. We know that publication takes a really long time. But how can we get insights into families faster from what we're learning from all this great research that y'all are participating in? And then we also have a lot we need to do to understand ASXL biology better. It's really complicated. There are a lot of mysteries that we have yet to solve. And part of that is some of these functional studies and this antibody development, just these really basic things that we haven't cracked the code yet in ASXL biology. And then the really big piece is we need capacity to fill these gaps. So we need somebody to lead the strategy. That is why we hired a chief scientific officer. David started with us just a couple of weeks ago. We need to engage families in that research strategy. That's what all of you are doing here at the conference. You're participating in these studies. You're taking surveys, and then we need to fund it all. So, and that's another piece that we ask families to help us with. We have to be the wizard. If you go back to the video that we saw on Friday night, we have to be the wizards that are figuring out how to fund this. We don't have to fund it all. We can help catalyze collaborations, but a lot of it comes down to what we can bring to the community through activation energy, and help get some of these studies off the ground, and then hope that some of the bigger funders can come in and pick up and go from there. So the really big question for us as a foundation is, how do we support families with their informational needs now, while we are building the research infrastructure to find treatments over time? So it's really a 2-part strategy. And we are figuring this out as we go, but having all of you here participating in research has been so inspiring. And I think it just speaks to how engaged this community is. And I just encourage you to keep doing more of that. So how do you support this strategy? When we call, answer. We are not going to ask you to do something that we think is superfluous or not worth it. If we are asking families to do something, it's because it matters, and we're going to do our very best to explain it. If you don't understand why it matters, ask us. We'll explain it to you and help you understand why it's important. And that all sort of feeds back to the natural history study and other clinical research as well. So I will leave it there, invite Dr. Bayless to come up, and we'll take questions at the end.
Bianca, is there a way to send samples for research if we are not there this weekend?
She's going to come join our panel.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. So maybe you guys can put in the Slido, the email for the natural history study in the biobank, but we are absolutely can help collect samples remotely. So we can send you tubes in the mail, and we'll send it with a prepaid FedEx bag to send it back to us. The tubes do expire, so we try to send them when we know you're going to actually go and get labs drawn. But if you're going to get labs drawn for another reason, and the phlebotomist will draw these extra tubes for you, that's a great opportunity to do that. So we work really hard with you to help coordinate getting those tubes to you and coordinating it with when it works for you and your family. We do a lot of that.